Camera action. Good evening and welcome commissioners, participants, and interested parties to the October 5th, 2023 meeting of the Cohasset Conservation Committee. I am Tom Bell, Chair of the Cohasset Conservation Commission, and will be running tonight's meeting as we implement the Massachusetts and Cohasset Wetlands Protection Acts and the Cohasset Stormwater Management Regulations. Conservation Commission meeting is now in session and is being held on a Zoom platform. If you have any questions for the commission, put them in the Q&A section at the bottom of the page. And when called, please limit your discussion to 3 minutes. You must include your name and address to be recognized. Present this evening on behalf of the Conservation Commission are our Conservation Administrator, Angela Giso, and Town Conservation Agent, Charlotte Pechtel. I'll take a roll call vote of the commissioners that are present. Will Ashton?
I'm present.
Kathy Berrigan?
Kathy Berrigan, present.
Chris McIntyre?
Chris McIntyre, present.
Tom Bell, present. So we have a quorum of 4 tonight. Oh, and yes, good. Our Associate Commissioner, Valerio Romano.
Present.
Thank you. And that looks like it. Okay, so hang on a second here. So I want to alert anybody present for the following hearings that have been continued. These include RDA 2317, 81 Border Street, that's continued to October 19th. NOI 2315, Government Island Wharf, that's continued to 10/19. NOI 2323 and Stormwater 2316, 205 Atlantic, that's continued to November 2nd. A certificate of completion for 49 Margin Street is continued to 10/19. Show cause hearing 76 Lambert's Lane is continued to 10/19, and show cause hearing for 4 Windy Hill Road is continued to 10/19. Did I get all those, Charlotte? Thank you. So our first order of business is the approval of the minutes for our August 24th meeting. You can only vote if you attended the meeting or watch the video of the meeting. So I make a motion that we accept the minutes for August 24th. Sorry.
Second.
Thank you. We'll have a roll call vote. Will Ashton?
Will Ashton, aye.
Kathy Berrigan?
Kathy Berrigan, aye.
Chris McIntyre?
Chris McIntyre, aye.
Tom Bell, aye. That motion passes 4-0-0. I want to also welcome Sanji Fernando, our other associate member. State your name and say present, please.
Oh, Sanji Fernando, present.
Thank you. Okay, so now that we've approved our minutes, we can, and told everybody about the continuations, we'll start with, we'll resume the amended NOI 20-09 80 Black Horse Lane. And that's have been continued from September 7th. Charlotte, will you introduce the applicant? You're muted.
Sorry, thank you. Yep, so being promoted now, we have Greg Morse from Morse Engineering and Kristen Sullivan, the applicant. She's just coming on now. Hey, Greg.
Good evening. This is Greg Morse, registered engineer, Morse Engineering, representing the property owner, Kristen Sullivan and John Sullivan. The property's at 80 Black Horse Lane. This is a request to amend the order of conditions and stormwater permit that was issued for this property. This was a new construction single-family home that was approved by the commission about 2 years ago. At this point in time, the house is substantially completed, but it was noted that there are a couple of deviations on the site. In my opinion, they're relatively minor, but it was, requested that we come in for an amendment to both the stormwater and the order of conditions. As such, we submitted a revised Form 3, which is the notice of intent document. We submitted a revised stormwater summary form outlining what the changes were. in an overall summary letter dated August 8th to the commission, as well as an updated plan. The revisions that I'm requesting, and I'm going to do a share screen of the plan. Just bear with me 1 second, put the plan up. Can you see that?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. So the amendments that we were seeking essentially are 5 amendments. The first one we discussed at a meeting back in August during a show cause hearing is the fact that where my cursor is in the backyard of the home, there was a second roof dry well system that was installed. So amendment number 1 is to accept that extra roof dry well system in the back of the garage. Again, it wasn't necessary for compliance with any stormwater permits. It was constructed in an area that was existing lawn and grass area that was previously disturbed at the site. The second is abandonment of a second cesspool that was found at the property. As you recall, this lot had an existing swimming pool right here, and it had an existing pool house. We found a cesspool right here where my cursor is. That cesspool is connected to the pool house. It has a manhole cover right up to the ground surface. So abandonment of a cesspool means that any liquid would be pumped out essentially by a septic pumping truck, which the cesspool right now, I can tell you, is dry. There is no liquid in it. But then secondly, using a wheelbarrow, they would fill that cesspool just with dirt and essentially leave it in place. We're not excavating, we're not removing it, but it's an abandonment in place. That's necessitated by Title V compliance and Board of Health requirements. Because this property is connected to town sewer, that cesspool must be abandoned. That's amendment number 2. Amendment number 3 was with respect to the back of the house. We had a proposed deck on the back of the house. The stairs that have been built for that deck are in this location. The stairs that were originally proposed off of the deck used to come off the corner of the deck, essentially at a 45-degree angle. When I submitted this request, I submitted 2 plans. I submitted this plan, but I also submitted one that essentially shows the as-built condition versus what was originally designed. So you can see that right here, this is the as-built set of stairs versus this is the set of stairs that was originally proposed. What's in red represents your 50-foot buffer zone. So you'll see that the stairs are really no closer to that 50-foot buffer zone. They say they serve the same purpose in either location. Next was the configuration of the driveway at the front of the site. The driveway is predominantly outside of the 100-foot buffer zone, the 100-foot buffer zone being in green. This property, also being on the Gulf River, has a 200-foot riverfront area, which is depicted by this purple line. The driveway that we had originally proposed off of Black Horse Lane, which is on the left-hand side of the screen, had essentially a circle in front of the house, as well as connection to the garage over here. What got built doesn't have that circle. It's more of a squared off driveway. It is smaller in size. It's approximately 4,722 square feet of driveway versus what was approved was 5,290 square feet of driveway. So it's less runoff, it's less impervious surface. The majority of the change being outside of the 100-foot buffer zone and outside the 200-foot riverfront area. And the last change was a request to add a stockade privacy fence along this lot line here to hide the mechanicals of the abutting property owner. The abutting property owner has HVAC mechanicals and pool equipment in this location. So we're requesting just to put a fence up along that property line. And that summarizes the amendments. I did include, as I said when I submitted, a copy of let's see, a copy of the summary here for the stormwater. You'll see that because we've reduced the imperviousness at the site by reducing the driveway, and then secondly, added that extra set of dry wells in our amended category here in red, all of the rates and volumes get decreased as opposed to what was approved originally. The impervious lot coverage goes down. Again, this project, there's no change in the limit of work. It's reduced impervious area. It maintains the approved setbacks overall to the wetland resource areas. I believe the changes are all fairly de minimis, but it's more of a, I think, a housekeeping, making sure that we reference this when we move forward with the order of conditions. What remains to be done at the site before we file for a certificate of compliance? There's kind of some final landscape to be done, and in the backyard was construction of a new swimming pool. Again, previously approved that pool. That pool has not been constructed yet, although again, the house has been, the driveway has been, and the majority of the yard has been constructed. I turn it over to you.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions or comments? So the only question I have, Mr. Morris, is the extent of that privacy fence. Does it, I couldn't see whether it stopped at the 50-foot buffer limit or not. Does it?
No, we had it going down to this point right here, which is the property corner. That's where we had it extending to. It's grass on either side of that location, pre-development, because this was a previously developed property. And in the post-development, it's, you know, grassed area as well.
So it looks like there's adequate passage for wildlife between the 50 and the Gulf River.
Yes, there would be, in my opinion.
Yeah. You said a stockade. So are there gaps in that stockade, or are they flush?
No, it would be a flush,
Okay.
you know, wood or vinyl fence.
Yeah. Oh, so you haven't decided whether it's wood or vinyl?
I don't think a material has been selected yet. No.
Yeah, that's all. That's all I was curious about. And, any other comments or?
Question about the dry well there. What are the dimensions of that dry well?
Sure. So they were infiltrator chambers that were installed with crushed stone. I could get the dimensions of that. I believe it was either 4 or 6 infiltrators that were installed at that location. So it's approximately 12 feet long by 6 feet wide.
Did you say that was previously approved?
So there was a show cause hearing on this property because of the infiltrators being installed at that location. And I came in front of the commission in early August to discuss that installation. And it I don't know if it approved is the word, but the commission seemed okay with it, I guess. It was in an area that was existing grass area. As it exists today, it's grass area. And again, it was kind of a redundant dry well. It wasn't one that was required to comply with any sort of regulation. The site contractor had a roof gutter coming off the back of the garage, and rather than discharging it to the ground, put it into the dry well so that it wasn't flowing out into the lawn, essentially.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised. I would have thought that we would have held it within the 100-foot buffer instead of extending it to the 50. But it sounds like that's a done deal. So
that area is 100% stabilized at this point. You can see it in this photograph here that was submitted. This is the back of the house. You can see here where the roof gutter comes down into the ground, and that dry well system is approximately right here where my cursor is under the grass lawn. Again, between the back of the house and where the dry well system is, there is a pool that is to be installed in this location. That was approved with the order of conditions. That remains to be done. Other than that, the site is substantially complete.
Yeah, and just to clarify with the commission too, when we had previously initially looked at this, it was installed, of course, in an after the fact setting. So we're looking at it after the fact. By the time it was, I believe by the time the show cause was initiated about a month ago, I think the grass had just been installed. So, when we saw some of the site show cause photos, the area was all dirt and we saw where the pipe was, and then the site was stabilized shortly afterwards. And Greg, just to confirm, was there a second downspout connection from the back of the garage, or is it only just that one?
I think it's just that one off the back
Yeah.
corner there.
And then is the downspout still going to connect to the trench drain, the trench that's going to go around the edge of the patio, or is it just going to go directly to the system, from the roof?
So on the plan here, we have the pool that's going into the backyard.
Mhm.
And around the pool is patio
Yep.
surface. Along the edge of that patio right here
Right.
is a proposed crushed stone trench, a 2 foot by 2 foot crushed stone trench. So
Yep.
that's to be constructed. None of
Okay.
the patio or pool have been built at this point.
Okay, gotcha. So the roof drains to the infiltration system are going to be separate from the gravel trench that's going to go around the edge of the patio. It looks like it's almost going underneath it, unless it is going to pipe to that trench and then go into the system, but I don't think so from this design.
Yeah, could you clarify that? I mean, your roof drain is, crosses the swimming pool. Obviously, that can't work. So where are you gonna put it?
So that roof drain will get rerouted right around the swimming pool. The chambers would stay there, but they would cut the 4-inch PVC on either side of the pool and just route it around.
Okay. And that'll be done when the pool is installed, I assume, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Commissioners, any other comments here?
No.
So, it looks like, we're up for a motion to approve this amendment to the, order of conditions. So I'll make a motion to approve the, amended order of conditions. Do I have a second?
Berrigan, second.
Thank you. With that, we'll go to a roll call vote. Will Ashton,
Will Ashton, I.
Kathy Berrigan,
Kathy Berrigan, I.
Chris McIntyre,
Chris McIntyre, aye.
Tom Bell, aye. Amended NOI passes 4-0-0.
Then, since a small amount of work is in the 50-foot buffer, do we want to just amend the variance that we
Yeah.
previously gave?
Yeah, let's do that. So I'll make a motion to amend the variance to work in the 50-foot buffer to install the infiltration chambers.
The infiltration's already installed, but they'll probably obviously have to reroute the roof drain, and reconnect that.
Yeah, okay, so that's the amendment we're going to make is to, I mean, it looks like I guess it is a little bit in the 50.
Yeah, there's also the abandoned cesspool, but I think that's already been filled per Board of Health and Title V regulations.
Okay, so let me revise that to issue a variance to work in the 50 to connect the roof drain from the garage to the infiltration chamber. Do I have a second?
Berrigan,
Second.
second.
Sorry.
That, we'll have a roll call vote. Will Ashton? Kind of breaking up there, Will, but
Yeah.
that's all right. We'll take that but as an aye. Okay. Kathy Berrigan,
Kathy Berrigan, I.
Chris McIntyre,
Chris McIntyre, aye.
Tom Bell, aye. That passes 4-0-0.
And then need a amended stormwater permit.
Yes, okay. I make a motion to amend the stormwater permit to connect the roof drain to the infiltration chamber and avoid the swimming pool. The site where the swimming pool is set. Do I have a second?
Berrigan, second.
Thank you. Roll call vote. Will Ashton,
Will Ashton, I.
Kathy Berrigan,
Kathy Berrigan, I.
Chris McIntyre,
Chris McIntyre, aye.
Tom Bell, aye. That passes 4-0-0.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Welcome.
Have a good night.
You're welcome.
Two things.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You guys.
Okay, so next up is a show cause hearing for 136 Border Street. And the subject is unauthorized removal of vegetation. Is that correct?
Mhm.
Charlotte, thank you.
So we have, we have connecting to audio right now. We have Michael Hurley, who is the property owner.
Great.
Just give him a second. But while he's connecting to audio, we kind of talked about it a little bit that, back in late July, early August, I'd received a report from an anonymous, person who chose to remain anonymous for vegetation removal, went out on the water and looked at it with the harbor master. It looks like that Phragmites was removed either close to the resource area within the land subject to coastal storm flowage or close to the salt marsh. And Michael had provided some history via email the day of the show cause. So the commission had just requested to spend some more time looking at that. With that, I can turn it over to Michael. And Michael, hi, you're welcome. You are muted.
Actually, Charlotte, before you do, would you show
Yeah.
us, did you take any pictures of this?
I did, yes.
No.
So this was a couple months ago, of course. So I'll just pull up the photos for reference.
Thanks.
So you can see the vegetation that was kind of removed and kind of just left here. And Michael has provided some historical photos and references and some information that he had previously discussed with the commission, I think in the mid-90s. And I think he can explain in more detail like what he's been doing to kind of maintain this area to manage the invasive species. But yeah, this is kind of what it looked like from the water back in like late July, early August.
Can you hear me, Charlotte?
Hi, Michael. How are you doing?
Fine, how you doing?
Good.
So, when you're ready,
Absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, would you like to kind of just summarize your email that you had sent to us a couple weeks ago and just kind of give the commission an overview of, what you've been doing to kind of maintain this area on your property?
yep, when I had gotten the permission back in the 90s, I basically used a scythe for about 10 years because it's the least invasive method of getting rid of them. I decided I was just going to, sign on to cutting them down about 3 times a year. One, when the growth is strong in the spring, let them get about, I usually don't let them get much more than about 3.5 feet high because their stalks get very tough at that point. So it's hard to get a scythe through that. So I did this scythe thing for about 10 years. And then as I got older, I discovered I should use a weed whacker to do that. And what I do is I just cut the Phragmites. It's not that difficult because over the years I've been maintaining it, the Phragmites have lessened in their thickness, the demographic thickness, you might say. All right. So instead of them being like every 5 inches or 6 inches, they're now more like a foot and a half from one another. So it's easy to cut them without damaging the Spartina, which flourished once I started cutting. When I first started, and I talked it over with Concom and I presented them research from south of here, actually, Virginia and the Carolinas. And at that time, it was not a well-known concept up here to actually cut the damn things. So I showed them what the research showed. They basically bought in on it, and since then I've been proceeding on that basis about 3 times a year. So I do it once. I usually pick the high tide when I know there's going to be a flood tide, because I discovered in dealing with them that they don't like salt water going down their gullets. Okay, so if you cut those stems about 5 inches off the surface of the marsh, which again allows the Spartina to go untouched, because that usually doesn't grow much higher than that unless it's a really thick stand. And then I don't have to worry about that because there are very few Phragmites in those thicker stands. And what I do there is I literally just pull the Phragmite stem out, as much root system as I can get at the same time, and leave the Spartina alone. I don't cut anywhere where there's a thinning of the Phragmites, because it's easy enough just to pull them out than to go along trying to cut everything. So I started in the late spring, probably like May, okay, when it's really gotten going. And then in July, and then usually one right around this time, because what I like to try to do, I did this for years, is I would then rake the chaff up into the highlands and let it deteriorate and mulch so that it stays off the marsh. Because Spartina, as I said in my written part, Spartina has the demonic method of trapping every flotsam that comes in on wind-driven tides right at the base of the outside growth, between Spartina and the Phragmite. What happens there is then it cloaks, it basically chokes off the Spartina. Meanwhile, the rhizomes are sending out shoots in the same area and providing more growth of Spartina. So, of Phragmite. So what happens is this is like a steamroller effect. So what I decided to do 20 years ago is rake the stuff off once I cut it, because it was really thick at that time. So it was a lot of refuse on top. So in order to get the Spartina underneath to regenerate, I rake it all off into long piles in the upland transition area. Let that mulch, and then the Spartina would regenerate. It was amazing how fast it came back, and then it took off from there. The only problem I unfortunately did not realize is you got to keep doing this year after year. You just cannot sit there and say, okay, I cut it down, maybe 1 or 2 years. It's never going to come back. Nope, comes right back. But it comes back much thinner, because I've killed off, by doing my cutting just before tides, I kill off a lot of the growth that's underneath, because the problem is these damn things have a rhizome system that is diabolical. You can't kill it. And if you cut it, now if you pull the rhizomes out and you cut it in sections, each one will regenerate a new stalk. So the only way to do it is to kill it down deep with salt water. And that's what I do. So that's what I've been doing all the way along. Now, this summer, I had some landscapers. I gave them the task. This was a new crew. I've had landscapers here probably about 10 years, and I've always instructed the boys how to do this so that it's not a clear cutting, and this time when the new crew went out there, they clear cut, the Phragmites, but they also touched some of the Spartina. Now, the photos I sent you show that everything that was cut is regenerated back. And you could walk the property and see there's no damage to the grasses, the marsh grasses. So that's basically it. It's, that's what my point is. I thought I had continuing permission to do so. I've been doing so. I do it for the reasons I outlined, as far as try to bring back the marsh grass, and also, it's a fire break from a continuing, across. We had a fire the next door neighbor probably about 5 years ago. And, you know, it was taking off, thank God for me, it was taking off in the opposite direction towards Situate. But it was a worry because there's a lot of combustible matter that these damn things create year after year if they're not cut and allowed to either mulch in place. Now I mostly mulch in place because the stands of Phragmites are so thin that they really don't create a problem, a cloaking problem for the Spartina below. You know, and frequently what happens is I do it just before the flood tide. So the flood tide carries it in towards the upland area, and then I just take a rake and I move it up higher. So that's my process.
So, Charlotte, do you know whether the approval of this predated our regulations?
So our rules and regulations were revised in 2001, and I'm not sure how old they were prior to that. But we did try to look through the 1994-95 minutes. I let Michael know, unfortunately, we didn't see much that was in there. There was definitely a hearing about the Phragmites and some other things for the property. But unfortunately, I can't find the tapes, but the minutes did kind of note some prior discussions with the commission. I can get the exact date, but I believe it was late 1994, early 1995. But our rules and regulations, I think, are current as of 2001.
Yeah. So you've explained the regulations to Mr. Hurley?
Yes, and Michael, we can probably we'll see what the commission would like to do, but I'm happy to work with you on some things, because normally for this type of work, we talked about the other project on Howard Gleason that had gotten an order of conditions. Typically, these types of activities in a resource area or buffer zone need to be permitted. Unfortunately, I couldn't find an old notice of intent unless you're able to kind of point me in the right direction. I tried looking through our archives. I didn't see anything, but obviously, of course, that order would have been expired if it did exist previously. So typically for this type of ongoing maintenance, we would usually want to see an order of conditions that's active so that you are covered under the Wetlands Protection Act and our bylaws.
Mm-hmm.
I'm impressed that this many years of cutting it, and your method of letting the saltwater inundate the cut stems is actually thinning the Phragmites out. That's an encouraging thing. Unfortunately, we don't allow, in general, removal of anything in the resource area. And so as much as we'd probably, everybody on the commission would like to see Phragmites go back to Europe, we really haven't made any provisions for, within our regulations and our bylaws, for removing it. We have, as Charlotte pointed out, we have allowed some elimination of Phragmites in the past, actually in the not too distant past. It seems so.
Well, I did give you articles from Massachusetts organizations, the DCR and the Environmental Affairs Office, that show that, it's an acceptable practice.
Yeah, at the state level, it is, but at the town level, it's not. That's the issue, really.
Right. So how is there an opinion on the board to change that so that there is some allowance of, selected cutting? That when I say selected cutting, that it's in a way managed so that it isn't like you suddenly find out that there are mowing machines all over the marshes or something like that, that it is done by people who know what they're doing.
Well, I would just say that we've had some informal conversations, not including the entire board, but
Mhm.
between individual commissioners about not specifically Phragmites, but being a little bit more flexible about allowing ecological restoration, which would include the removal of invasive species. But we have not changed our bylaws yet. And we haven't put enough effort into trying to evaluate what the consequences of that would be to really move forward with that. So, you know, the bottom line is we've got existing regulations that we expect everybody to abide by. And until we do get to the point where we can develop a solid plan for ecological restoration, which I would assume would include removal of invasive species. We're just not there yet.
Well, Tom, it comes down to a choice between the Phragmites are going to kill. Now, you could go down to my neighbors on either side and you'll see there's no Spartina grass as high up on the marshland as mine is, because they haven't done, they've done clear cutting in the past, done by landscapers in both cases, but it's been very erratic. It's been, hasn't been any done on the land to the west of me probably in 4 years, and then the one to the east of me 2 years ago. But the problem is then how do you put it? The Phragmites take over and they start killing back off the Spartina grass that I've been, managing and creating for the last 30 years. So it's kind of counterproductive to say, well, we don't like anything cut when the cost of not cutting is going to be the loss of the natural or the native species that are there. So I'm looking for some sort of,
I think you could apply. I mean, you could apply for, a permit and we could review it in that sense. And what we're currently doing is a show cause hearing. And so if you've documented it and submitted it, I think we could review it in that format. Right now, we can't, just approve your methods because whatever you presented in the 90s doesn't exist in our records. So if you put that down, we could review it and vote on it as a commission at that point. But we can't give you any permission to continue this tonight. Am I correct in saying that, Charlotte, Tom?
Yes, absolutely.
So
Yeah,
we would want to see a notice of intent to do this and a plan that was developed by presumably landscape architect, Charlotte, or something of that nature.
For an NOI, our regulations just say a professional engineer or another appropriate professional. So you definitely have the freedom of, working with a necessary professional. I would definitely go towards, environmental science, ecology, wetlands scientists, who might be able to help provide some guidance and a plan on how we could kind of solidify this. And, if you can, I believe, I think the commission does want to see some of the historical, activity of the repeated cutting and the decrease in the, the density and growth of Phragmites. And I think that would be pretty good support to submit and include in an ecological restoration notice of intent. There definitely are certain, we could even look at, Michael, I can work with you on this, but there are certain types of limited projects that involve invasive species management that can also be considered as part of the NOI. And then you go by those regulations under the Wetlands Protection Act, since our bylaws are obviously stricter in terms of, not allowing any vegetation of any kind without, proper permitting. So, we can definitely look at those options and, we can definitely take a look at the 2020 NOI that was previously submitted, although I will say that one involved all herbicides, which the commission did, of course, not allow. So I think this repeated cutting, could potentially be, a long-term viable solution based on the information you've provided us. But as the commissioners have said, we would want to review this more in a permitting setting with a notice of intent.
Uh-huh. All right. Charlotte, perhaps you have a couple of names that you work with as far as the wetland scientists?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I can provide those to you. And I believe, we can probably work with those professionals to evaluate this kind of plan because they do ecological restoration permitting. So we can definitely rely on their expertise. And as a commission, we can look at that as well through a public hearing.
Okay. So where do we go?
Well, the ball's in your court,
Okay.
right?
I didn't know whether the show cause is a decision meeting or is it just let's talk about what we found and what's going on.
Right.
Yeah, that's what it is. It's more of like a show and tell and a public discussion. And then the commission will obviously provide, the recommendations. It sounds like they'd be open to reviewing this through a notice of intent. So does any other commissioners, do you guys have any other comments or what you'd like to see in the NOI, or if you have any other opinions? Or
Just in the materials, I saw some discussion about invasive crabs as well. And I know those weren't brought up at this meeting. Is that something that would be addressed in the notice of intent as well?
No, because I don't know how you get rid of the crabs. They're just burrowed into the marshland. I was just pointing out that if there was a concern about, any deterioration of the marsh, it's actually, now coming out that it's not the plants, it's the damn crabs that are burrowing in and they create holes. I don't know whether you saw my comments, but I was wondering as I'm down on the marsh over the 30 years that where these holes come from, and it could have been vegetative matter that just happens to be rotting and it happens to create holes, kind of like horizontal holes in the mud wall. But then I stumbled on these articles.
I think we lost you, Mr. Hurley. Was that me?
No.
Michael, sorry, we lost your sound for a second. I don't know if he's in a poor reception area.
Mr. Hurley, if you can hear us, leave the meeting and then rejoin it, and let's see if that restores your audio.
I don't want to belabor the issue with the crab stuff. I just saw it in the materials and I didn't know if something was being done to sort of mass exterminate crabs in the marsh,
No,
Hi,
I don't.
Michael.
I frankly haven't looked into it because I don't know what you could have possibly do in eradicating crabs that would be an acceptable practice because, the only way if it isn't a natural predator would be some sort of poison that you're,
I think that was my fear. So yeah, if your NOI comes just about the marsh and that's what the board, considers, I just saw the crab material, so I thought it was worth it.
It was really just an FYI. It really isn't related to the Phragmites, but it was like if anybody has a concern about the condition of the marshes, here's an example, of how the marsh is being stressed out by a predator, you might say, that no one really gave it a thought until recently when they started doing these studies since 1997, and they're discovering this is going on up and down the East Coast.
Yeah, they're a problem and they're not going to go away.
No, they're not. So, all right.
It's probably easier to remove Phragmites locally than crabs that are mobile.
It is much easier to handle them. They don't move around.
So your notice of intent should really address your plan to reduce or even remove the Phragmites. It sounds like what you're doing is reasonably effective. And certainly it's admirable that you can do this without using any herbicides.
Nope, never had.
How many linear feet of frontage do you have there that you treat?
It's probably about 150, 180 feet.
Yeah.
And then probably about 20 feet out.
Yeah, so you're gonna submit an NOI. It's gonna have a site plan, a description of the problem, and your proposed solution.
Right. Okay, will do.
In conjunction with a professional wetland scientist.
Right. Okay, I will do that.
Great.
All right. Thank you, one and all.
You're welcome.
Welcome.
Thank you, Michael. We'll be in touch.
Okay, thank you, Charlotte. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Oh, no, sorry, Tom, just for the record, we want to close the show cause hearing, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Do we need a motion for that?
Probably should. I know we're not as consistent as we probably should be, but
Well, okay, I'll move that we close the show cause hearing. Do I have a second?
Second.
We'll have a roll call vote. Will Ashton,
Will Ashton, I.
Kathy Berrigan,
Kathy Berrigan, aye.
Chris McIntyre,
Chris McIntyre, aye.
John Bell, aye. The show cause is closed. I vote of 4-0-0.
all right. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you again. Good night.
Thanks. Have a good night.
Okay, so next we're going to resume consideration of the certificate of completion for 34 Lambert's Lane. That's continued from September 21st.
And I'm promoting Frank Agostino. Oh, he declined to be promoted. Okay, well, I can follow up. So our last conversations were, we wanted just a couple more things to be done, so I'll just pull up the approved plan. This section in the back of the rear deck with patio that was supposed to be removed and replaced with loam and seed. He has done that and provided photos that this was done, and obviously the seed has now been installed. And the other thing that we wanted done, oh, see him raising his hand. Hi, Frank. You're muted.
I'm sorry, I hit the wrong button.
That's okay. Hold on. I can promote you. Give me 1 sec. All right. Thanks, Frank. And I can pull up the
Sorry about
photos.
that. I'm not very good on Zoom.
That's okay. Yeah, I can pull up the photos. But yeah, let me just pull the plan back up. So the second thing that we had wanted, there were the stone trench. We just wanted, it was covered with grass, so the commission just wanted it to be replaced with the 4 inches of mulch on top, since that was what this is what the approved plan is, and that's what it required. So he has done that, and I can pull up the photos to confirm. I think those are the only 2 items for, so this is the, before it was covered with mulch, this is the stone trench. So it has the filter fabric and the crushed stone underneath. And then now and this is the inspection port just brought up to grade with the loam and seed installed behind it. And then this is the final trench with the mulch. And then this is the area in the back that was replaced with loam and seed. And it was originally patio.
Good. So it seems like all of our concerns were addressed.
I would say so.
Okay.
I mean, the grass hasn't come through yet, but it'll take a few weeks, but.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think we need to wait for that.
I'm working on finding some sod. I haven't been able to find any place that had any. I would rather have sod, but because my dogs go walking through there. But
Yeah.
I'll find some within the next week or so.
Okay.
You're gonna do sod instead of seeding?
Well, no, I put the grass seed down for now, but I prefer sod. I just no place has it in stock right now, and you have to order 500 square feet. So they're waiting for somebody else to place an order, and when they do, I'm going to get some.
Okay. Yeah. So it seems to me that this is been completed. Just even though it hasn't been sodded, it has been, the mulch is down. It's the patio's been removed. It'll take a little while to stabilize, but I think we can move forward with a certificate. Charlotte, do you have any comments?
There weren't any proposed plantings with this project, but I would just recommend our standard condition 40 for no herbicides, chemicals, et cetera, in the resource area buffer zones for long-term, ongoing conditions.
Yep, I understand.
Commissioners, does anyone have comments or further questions?
Nope, not me.
Okay, I'll make a motion to issue a certificate of completion for 34 Lambert's Lane.
Second.
I don't have an NOI number here in front of me.
Oh, it's NOI 22-34, and we
yeah.
wanted that with condition 40, correct?
Right, with condition 40, that's correct. Do I have a second?
Second.
I'll have a roll call vote. Will Ashton,
Will Ashton, I.
Kathy Berrigan,
Kathy Berrigan, I.
Chris McIntyre,
Chris McIntyre, aye.
Tom Bell, aye. The certificate of completion has passed 4-0-0.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, Frank. I will work on that either most likely Monday, and I can issue that to you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Charlotte. I appreciate all your help, and thank you from everybody. I appreciate it.
Welcome.
Welcome. Good night.
Thanks. Have a good
Thank
night.
You too. Bye-bye.
48-hour issues, Charlotte?
All right. Yes, I have a few. Sorry, I'll go through them quickly.
Okay.
26 Lambert's Lane. Associate Commissioners, this was, long story short, a very long and painful process to get an after the fact stormwater permit for restoring the area from previous clear cutting and alteration of 5,000 square feet. So we had issued a stormwater permit as part of an enforcement order to restore the area essentially. And the original goal of this project was it was supposed to be completed by June 30th. That did not happen. So we had placed a temporary cease and desist to work out basically a work schedule, a construction schedule. The construction schedule that we had approved was supposed to be finished by essentially fall. And that unfortunately, as of recently, will probably not happen because the building inspector has placed a stop work order on the entire site because the part of the stormwater plan had involved some ledge removal. And this is as part of like essentially a long-term larger idea to eventually develop the property. Per the land alteration bylaw under zoning, you need a special permit to remove ledge. So since that had not been obtained, the building inspector put a stop work order on the entire site. And so this site will not be finished probably until the following spring. It's going to take a few months to apply for this permit with planning board, and it's going to have to go through a review and everything else. And the planning board will say whether or not all that ledge can be removed. So we may see some changes to the stormwater plan that we had originally approved. And so in terms of site stabilization, this was my concern. I talked to the building inspector about it, but the problem is if, I hate to say it this way, but if you give this person 1 inch, they take a mile. So he doesn't want any activity on the site whatsoever. And that includes throwing down grass seed, because again, you give this person 1 inch, they take a mile. And that's quite literally what has been happening with the site. So at the very least, there is still a kind of beat up straw wattle that is at the edge of the riverfront area. So all this work is outside of wetlands jurisdiction for now. There is a very thick strip of unmowed grass that is in between the erosion control barrier and where the work is occurring. And where the work is occurring is kind of like an indented area. So in terms of stabilization, it doesn't seem like it'll long-term be an issue, but I will be keeping an eye on this because I am a little bit concerned that straw wattles, of course, don't do anything. So I'll keep an eye on this site, but that is what's happening for now. So this permit is basically on hold, probably won't get done until next year. So that's that one.
Charlotte, when was the last time you were out there?
I haven't been out there in a few months, but the building inspector has been out there very frequently.
I would think that with the rainfall we've had, there's probably a lot of native plants.
Yeah, probably some weeds coming up. Yeah,
That have
I would
grown.
hope so.
That would certainly work to stabilize
Yeah.
the site.
When we inspected the site back in, I want to say July, August, there was definitely some stuff that was starting to come up. And again, like I said, there's that thick strip of grass that's in between where the disturbed area is and the erosion barrier. So seems like it'll be okay, but we'll keep an eye on it. And hopefully the site just becomes a weed area and then at least it's somewhat stabilized.
Well, I mean, whenever you clear something like this, an invitation for
Yeah.
invasives more
Mhm.
than natives.
Great, yeah. Okay, so that's one. And then there was a couple tree things, just to let you guys know. 249 Jerusalem Road, this was an order of conditions and a stormwater permit. No, sorry, just an order of conditions. And there's a massive hickory tree that is facing the marsh on the edge of the 50, actually it's in the 50-foot buffer. It was evaluated by a certified arborist. There are 2 leaders on the tree, and one of the leaders is pretty much rotted out and could be a danger to the tree. So that leader only has about 20% canopy cover if you take it out, and it won't harm the tree by taking it out. So I did allow that administratively to happen since it wasn't going to harm the health of the tree. And then there's another tree at 31 Elm Street. I think it was struck by lightning or something, and basically the tree's kind of just like half a trunk with a tiny little branch sticking out. It's just outside of the riverfront area, but it may or may not be in the town right away. So I told the applicant to work it out with the town, but you know, it may be best for that tree to come out because there's a tree behind it that's obviously going to remain. So I don't know. I mean, it's just standing upright. It probably isn't a safety hazard anymore, but it is struck like all the way down. Like there's a massive line in it.
And that happened, what, about a month ago? That flood?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just outside the riverfront, so it's kind of technically outside of my jurisdiction, or our jurisdiction.
Yeah.
Anyway, and then 121 Nichols Road, I received a call from Cohasset PD that someone was basically discharging pool water into the street. By looking at the history that was sent to me from an abutter who's down gradient of this property, this is not the first time that this has happened. The commission apparently warned this person back in 2019 or 2018 not to do this, and that they would let it go the first time. But if this happened again, they would pursue enforcement and fines. So I will speak with council about this one because it's, you know, there are definitely BMPs for discharging pool water. We have them in our orders of condition, but that is not how you do it. Obviously, dumping it right into the street. And also, if you dump it directly into a catch basin or river or whatever, that's illegal with state and federal laws. It's just a little bit tougher to draw that connection when someone's not directly dumping it, even though it's very clear where it's going in the catch basin. But yeah, so the town's basically turning it over to us. And so I'll look into it more, probably initiate either a show cause hearing or an enforcement order. We'll go from there. And then 216 Atlantic Ave. Tom and I have kind of been looking at this one. We're experimenting with a little bit more soft enforcement. So basically this is a person, their family has lived at this property for decades. So this is a generational property. And they had hired a person who either didn't know the regulations or didn't care. They had cut down 11 dead trees on the property that were all standing upright. So they were not necessarily a safety hazard to the home. They did it without permission. And so I had notified the homeowner, since she has submitted an RDA for a different project for next meeting. And Tom and I walked the site with her and explained the rules, and she is willing to comply and fix this entirely. We identified, of the 11 trees removed, 9 out of the 11 were in resource area and buffer zone. So 4 in the resource area, 5 in the buffer. 2 were on the abutting property, which belongs to her cousin, I think. So the letter was sent to all property owners, and they will work it out, and they will be submitting a mitigation plan, working with a certified professional to replace the trees 2 to 1 in the resource area, or from the ones cut down in the resource area, and then 1 to 1 for the ones cut down in the buffer zone. And at this time, it seems like that she is more than willing to comply and wants to fix it. But obviously, if anything changes and if we see any resistance, then we'll bring them before the commission through enforcement or show cause. But I guess, you know, that's kind of what we discussed, especially since this seems like this person was caught completely off guard. So, you know, normally bring him in for show cause, but at least this time around, we're gonna try to see how this works, but she's already on it. She's already called professionals, so.
I
she's doing it.
would point out that this, this property is very minimally landscaped. It's pretty much native woods. And that's the way it's always been, and that's the way they want to leave it. So we're not talking about a manicured lawn and a lot of nursery stock planted around. It's like 99% native plants there, and they've really been pretty good stewards of their property, I think, at least in terms of keeping a pretty dense canopy. And the only thing they object to is what we would all object to, which is a pretty big stand of poison ivy and
Oh, thank you, yeah.
yeah. So, but still, I mean, there are pretty good sized trees near the house. They aren't coming to us and saying, we're afraid these trees are going to fall on our house. Can we cut them down? None of that. So, you know, it's fairly different from a lot of what we see out there from landowners who come to us and definitely want to cut the trees down around their house and have a big lawn and all that. So I guess it seemed like, because she is a good steward, that it would be best to try this easier approach. And like Charlotte just said, if it starts to we meet any resistance whatsoever, we're going to have a show cause hearing.
Oh, one question on that, I totally agree with the approach, but like, how do we memorialize that? Like, or will it be in the like? I was just thinking about the other guy with the Phragmites. Like how do we make sure like there's some record of that?
So that's a good question. The violation notice was sent to them.
Plan.
Yeah. So the violation notice was sent to them in writing. It's basically a mini enforcement order. You know, the violation notice can kind of serve as the record for the violation and the mitigation requirements, and then the site plan would be kind of filed with that. But you are right, Sanjay. That's a good question of, do you do an enforcement order to document that? Because that's how we dealt with some other tree removal activity recently on other properties. You know, the violation letter could serve as that instead if you don't do an enforcement order, I think, unless we want to see just an official enforcement order, since some of those trees were cut down in the resource area.
Like, I don't know if this is an issue. Like, I'm just thinking of someone years from now coming back to them and saying, oh,
yeah,
you know, you violated and there was no record of our decision to soft shoot it a little bit, you know, like, which I think is the right answer, but just giving them some record of that.
Yeah, that's a good point. Maybe I can talk to council about that, because at least with any sort of violation notices and letters, those already serve as like a public record and a file. But you know, you are right of, you know, and it will be recorded in the minutes for this meeting, but you know, it's obviously that's harder to track than an official enforcement order or NOI filing. So maybe I'll just double check with council on that, if they would want to see an official and enforcement order, or if this is sufficient. Because you know, our bylaws, regulations, and DEP enforcement manual, you know, kind of encourage using any and all the above kind of enforcement methods and not just going straight to fines. So, you know, anytime you write something down and document it, I think that's really helpful. But yeah, maybe we can double check to see if we need to have anything else for our record. Good question.
Yeah, they seem really great stewards of the property. I think I know the property, and so just to make sure they don't get jammed up later on.
Absolutely. Yeah. And yeah, I'll look into that and I'll update you guys. And if you know, if we do have to do a show cause or something to kind of document it a little bit more, then we can do that. But yeah, she definitely is already all over calling professionals and trying to hire somebody and work on a plan, and which is good. I mean, that's what we want to see. But the hardest part for a lot of people to hear, which is what we've seen, is people think that dead trees aren't a big deal. They are. They still pose, they have a lot of ecological value. It's wildlife habitat, food, shelter, et cetera, for many different species. So it is very important to have dead trees in the ecosystem. So, you know, what may seem like not a big deal to a lot of people is more of an educational opportunity for us to kind of encourage that. But I think we've been doing that through our submissions already. So, but once we explained it to her, I think she kind of, she seemed to really understand a lot more. And I spoke to the other property owner who's her sister, and she was also explained the regulations. Yeah. Awesome. That's 48-hour stuff.
Agent update.
All right, now time for the regular updates. 10 Ocean Ledge Drive, that was the stormwater permit that we had closed out. They completed all of our contingent conditions. They stabilized the area with much more grass than was there before. They recorded the long-term operation maintenance plan. They reran the calculations with all the as-built conditions and changed grading and everything else. Everything's still lined up. I just recently issued a COC now that they had all those documents in place. And then 124 Elm Street. What did I have? Oh, this one, they did the wall stuff very quickly. We had previously submitted, they had previously submitted an RDA to patch up that seawall. They already had, it's already done, and they're working on a completion report. So pretty much after we gave them approval, they did it in like a week and a half. That's done. And then 378 Beechwood Street, that was an administrative stormwater permit I had issued earlier this week. It was for a pool and a small rain garden. The area in the backyard is extremely flat, no ledge removal. The abutting properties are well over, you know, the homes at least are well over several hundred feet away, and the calculations all lined up. So that was a permit that we issued. It took a while to work on this one only because that entire area is an ACEC, I'm sorry, is a priority habitat, excuse me. It's not near wetlands, but it's priority habitat. So we had reached out to Natural Heritage about this because that's their jurisdiction too. And they said for secondary structures like pools, those don't need MIPA review for, you know, priority habitat. So that's good for me to know. But we did get that in writing before they submitted a stormwater permit because I wanted to make sure that they didn't need any other state approvals for that project. And then other updates, 605 Jerusalem Road. This was a violation letter that I had sent out for a small fence that was put along the edge of Straits Pond to block geese and other birds from coming onto their property. I sent them a letter saying remove it in 30 days or submit an after the fact RDA or notice of intent. They removed the fence pretty much almost entirely, except potentially for a small portion behind where their shed/barn is. But the reason why it was a violation is because one, right up at the edge of a resource area, and two, it was impeding wildlife passage. So now that the entire fenced area has been removed, except for maybe a small portion near the shed, I don't think there's any other need for enforcement action. Tom or anybody else, do you guys agree?
Yeah.
Okay. And then CJC, this was some recent activity within the last month or so that where they like did stuff along the strips and they cut a bunch of stuff and threw it in the wetland. DPW said that was not them and it was MassDOT. So I am trying to talk to MassDOT that that's work one, even though it may or may not be exempt, I would have needed to get written, you know, notice. And I don't like the fact that they threw a bunch of stuff in the wetlands. So I don't know if I'll ever hear from them, but I'm trying. And then the tree bank question. I've been getting a lot of questions from, you know, various departments and groups about the tree bank under the street tree policy. From what we found so far, there is not really an official account right now that's managed by the treasurer, even though that's what the policy says. There was an account that was created or used for when some people paid into the tree bank a couple years ago from previous violations, but that account was not set up for revenue. It was only set up to just deposit the money and then use it. And there's nothing in the account right now. So I'm kind of actively working with the treasurer and DPW and a few other people to try and establish some sort of account. So for enforcement in our, you know, for example, if we wanted to tell someone to pay into the tree bank or something instead of replacing the trees, that could be an option to us in the future. Since sometimes you can't always place a tree in certain areas. So that could be something that we could consider. And then legislative updates. I don't know if you guys want me to go through all of them, but I put them all in OneDrive. There's a lot of state laws that are being passed and considered and have already been passed. And then funding has been increased in a lot of different state environmental departments. So it's just really nice to kind of see the good news. So they're all in OneDrive in the meeting folder if you guys want to look at them under agent updates. And then I don't know if you guys want to do this since Chris McFarland needs to look at the order special conditions, but I revised the stormwater permit conditions and they're much shorter than the order. I could pull them up if you guys want to look at them and vote on them, or if you guys want to wait for Chris and Eric to look at them, then I'll do whatever you guys prefer.
Let's wait until they've had a look at them.
Okay. So yeah, some of the conditions I added for stormwater as a pre-construction meeting, since I'm getting way too many issues with erosion control. And then the other stuff I added was actually about pools, since we didn't have that condition in our stormwater permit. There's also under our MS4 requirements, there are these brochures on erosion control, LID measures, and all this other stuff. So we also have our own Conservation Commission sheet on pool BMPs. So I was encouraged by North and South River Watershed Association, who helps us with our MS4 compliance for education and all this other stuff. They said you should be passing these out when you issue permits. So moving forward, I'll just do that. I know it may look like a lot of junk paperwork, but it helps with our compliance. But I think it's helpful, especially for contractors. Like that erosion control brochure is really good. I had them posted to our website on the wrong page, but they're posted to our website, and I'll be issuing them with permits. And then for the pool BMPs, I might print out that separate sheet and issue that with orders and stormwater too.
Charlotte, should we look at those best management practices ourselves and include them in our conditions?
We have so it's condition 52. We do have that in there. And then whoever did that a couple of years ago, we also made a information sheet that's pretty much has the same information, but I haven't looked at the two documents to compare them yet. But we made these apparently a couple of years ago, probably around the time of this initial 21 Nichols, because I think it was Jay and a few other people who had worked on them, and they incorporated that into the special conditions template. But yeah, no, feel free to take a look if any of that information could be updated. Doesn't look right. The most updated versions are all in OneDrive in the meeting folder. So I'll just keep putting this on the agenda until everyone looks at them, and then we can vote on them when we're ready. And then last but not least, I sent out, for all the 2020 permits, I sent out expiration letters, just educating people that your order's expired or expiring. Sanjay, except for you, because I know we're going to work on that one. Basically just letting people know that their permits are expired and that they either need to close them out in a COC and or if they want to keep doing work, submit a new permit. I'm trying to educate people that these could potentially, I was very general in the letter because I don't want to get legally implicated in anything, but I tried to educate people saying your order is recorded with the registry. So it's in your best interest to close it out. It could potentially delay any future sale of the home. And that's all I said. Because people have been calling, they're like, oh, okay, I'll get that done. Because what I'm seeing with these COC requests is last minute, someone finds this permit, it's however many years old, they want to close it out, the sale's in a week. I'm like, that's not going to happen. I need this, 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 and this. And so we often get rushed as a commission because of these sales. So I'm trying to slowly go backwards and send these notices to people to educate them to pretty much close out their permit. Just it's in their best interest. I don't know if I can force them to do it, but that's it.
So when we were looking at 136 Border Street, we took a look at Near Map and started to notice as we scrolled back over the years that a number of people along the Gulf River, don't know how many yet, seem to be storing their floats on the marsh. So they're dragging them across the marsh to get them to the upland or near the upland. This is really a destructive practice. I think it's a regular practice. It's probably been going on for decades. And so we're
not allowed.
Yeah, it's not allowed. I have a feeling that we would be issuing a lot of show cause hearings if we were to look very closely at this.
Yeah, I actually sent, you guys will see it if you get the 5 things updates from town manager, but I sent a very long blurb about these 4 things, and this was one of them about, since this is around the time people are gonna start to take their floats out of the water if they haven't already. Just said you're not allowed to put them on salt marshes or drag them across salt marsh. It has to be stored in an upland location. And then I also did add the, no discharging pool water into the street, tree removal stuff, and no pesticide, etc. So I put those 4 things to send for a 5 things update. Hopefully at least some people see them, but yeah, the float stuff is, I tried to send a bunch of letters last year. I did not have the time, but I definitely found at least 6 or 7 properties that I just drove by or saw that clearly have been storing their floats in the marsh for years. And so, that is one of the edits in the special conditions, that the float is to be stored in an upland location per our regulations. So we're going to add that to the template, and we can issue that with an ongoing, condition with a COC. But yeah, I don't know if you guys have any suggestions on how to handle these, since I'm sure we're going to see a lot of them this winter. I've already educated a couple dozen people in town, but it's easiest for people to just leave it on the marsh. That's why they do it.
Yeah, certainly in the Gulf River.
Yeah.
The alternative is to tow them out and in and out seasonally, and where you tow them to and how you store them is not entirely clear. I did happen to notice that somebody's float was on a trailer yesterday in the parking lot at the boat ramp. Lori was taking a look at it. She said that it's being handled. She wasn't very explicit about what was going on there, but clearly this is somebody's private float. It looks like that they'd hauled out at the boat ramp. So that is an alternative, because you can haul them out at the boat ramp. In this case, their trailer had 4 flat tires, and they weren't going anywhere until they had fixed their trailer up so it was robust enough to actually carry this float. It's a pretty good sized float. It must have been, I would say, 12 by 15, something like that. And then you add all the weight of the marine growth on the floats. It's a pretty heavy structure. But that seems to be probably the only way of actually dealing with this. And it's going to cause a bit of an uproar, I think, with people on the Gulf River. I don't think we have that problem on Little Harbor, but we might, and we probably have.
There's a few.
Are there?
Yeah, Gammons Road is one of them, and then Beach Street, there's a couple. But one person on Beach Street who we had a previous show cause for last season, I did not see their float on the marsh, so maybe they found a different location. So that's one person that changed there.
Now getting those out in and out seasonally would be really tricky. I mean, you have to do it on a high tide. Actually, hook it up at high tide and go out with the tide, and then you've got to get it all the way back over to Cohasset Harbor and into the cove, then to the boat ramp, and then truck it around to your property if you even have upland space to store your float. It's a touchy subject, but the fact is that this is tremendously damaging to the marsh. I mean, this is not a trivial thing. If you think back of all the walkways we've permitted and all the issues that surround this about protecting the marsh so that the slats are far enough apart so there's enough sunlight that gets to them, and how they're actually installed to prevent damage to the marsh. When you think about these big floats that weigh several tons, perhaps, this one probably weighed at least 2 or 3 tons, maybe more than that. Those things sitting on the marsh, they're going to do some serious damage, and particularly if you drag them across the marsh to your upland area. So
I don't know anything about floats, but do they have to come out seasonally?
I don't think so. I don't know why they do have to come out, other than, during if you get a nor'easter, Little Harbor can get pretty full and it can get pretty choppy out there. So we also don't want these things breaking loose and and becoming marine debris. We already have a good deal of debris in Little Harbor that's causing, it's mostly lobster traps that are capturing sediment, and Little Harbor is getting shallower and shallower because of that. If you've been around long enough, you know that there was a very deep pool that was pretty extensive, went quite a ways up into Little Harbor from the bridge, and it is slowly filling in with gravel. And there's a lot of lobster traps that are embedded in that gravel, and they help trap it. So this is kind of a long-term problem, and it's catching up with us. We've done a number of dumb things there. The most egregious one was to dredge Cohasset Harbor, put the sand on Sandy Beach. It promptly blew across the road into Little Harbor, and we probably lost several inches of depth there in Little Harbor with that. And that sand really, I used to think that it'd get swept out, but in fact it doesn't, because the velocity on the ebb tide is nowhere near sufficient to clean it out compared to the velocity on the flood. So we could very well see Little Harbor turn into a marsh over the next few decades. We aren't careful, and that would really be a tremendous loss to town of Cohasset to lose this remarkable salt pond that we have.
Probably a good
I
idea to
just
discuss.
wonder, like, I was just wondering, like, what are the options, like, if you leave it in and don't, like, if they were putting it on the salt marsh, you have the same vector of risk with a northeaster, right? Because you could get blown off of the salt marsh. Like, take a look at Harbor, for instance. So, like, if we just tell them to leave it there, like, are we increasing the risks at all?
Well, first of all, they can't store it on the marsh. That's the
No,
point.
that's what I mean. Like, they're
You have
storing
to-
on the marsh
you-
now. Just
You
tell
have
them
to
to
put
leave
it
it
on
in
the
there.
upland. You have to put it in an upland, and presumably it's protected from storm surge and going wild on them, going rogue.
But if it's in the summer and there's a storm, you'll have the same risk too, right? Like, I'm just trying to understand, like,
Yeah.
like, what are we really netting here? Like, versus like just tell them to leave it in the marsh, or just don't store it on the marsh, just leave it as is.
Well, we don't really get nor'easters during the good season here, the summer. So it's not an issue while they're in there, because we rarely get a nor'easter, and when we do, they're not very strong between the months of May and September, when people want to have their floats in.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we can tell them what to do with their docks. We can tell them what not to do.
Yeah.
If they want to get it out, that's up to them, but they just can't do it in a way that damages the resource. So that means hauling it out at the boat launch, then you have at it. But I think we gotta crack down on it, and
Yeah.
we've already brought it to we've brought some people in over the last couple of years for this reason. So I think if we do it to one person on Little Harbor, we have to go the distance, make sure we're being fair, I guess.
Yeah, well, we have the same issue in Bailey Street and Briggs Harbor. I think part of that is in Cohasset, not very much, but we do have several places around town. Little Harbor, Straits Pond. There's some illegal floats there, and that don't come out, as far as I know. And the Gulf, there's a lot of them. So it's the sort of thing where we saw it and now we can't unsee it.
It's
And
getting worse too, because obviously over the last couple of years since, I've been the agent, there's been a lot of permitted dock projects, and a good portion of them have been in Little Harbor. I would say most of them.
And we've done some for Gulf River too.
Yep, golf number 2. But yeah, we could definitely be having these discussions with applicants, just knowing that when, if they get approval and if they get all the licenses, they have to be responsible for this and they have to be stewards of the environment. If we're going to give you a dock, obviously you have to be following our regulations and whatever DMF and DP recommend and all these other things. So it's going to be a burden permitting wise regardless. So we can definitely be having those conversations to make sure they do everything correctly and putting them in the order and making it very clear and obviously
I mean, it's a
issuing it as,
state law.
it
Can
is.
we do a mass show cause, like for like
Yeah, maybe bring them all in at once.
whole sections, like do everyone in the little harbor that's doing it, and
Yeah.
then everyone in the Gulf, just get them all at once. That way they
It
know.
might be easier. Yeah, I mean, it might be a hot
Good
mess
idea.
with a Zoom
Well,
hearing, but yeah.
Maybe we should start with an educational meeting
Yeah,
and give people a chance to wrap their head around the fact that it's
Do it soon. They're gonna be hauling them out soon, so.
I don't know if I have the time to write all the letters.
Well, this is an ongoing thing. Certainly, as we approve these floats, we need to have an order of conditions that is bulletproof in terms of you can't drag it across the marsh to get it to the upland. It's got to come. They've got to have a plan for removing it from their site unless they're going to leave it there. I don't think it's illegal to leave them there.
I'll
I think
double
that's what I'm
check.
just getting at, like, let them,
Yeah.
like, maybe have this education idea is perfect, but it's like, I think what we said, they can't drag it on the salt marsh, whether they leave it in or remove it seasonally, like, they've got to make that call, right?
Yeah, we can't tell them you have to leave it in. We can't tell them
Yeah.
it's not illegal to leave it in, as far as I know.
Yeah, and it
Yeah.
also, DEP is very, very strict about salt marsh protection. So anything that's placed in a salt marsh that will temporarily or permanently raise the elevation of the marsh is considered fill. That's why they're really strict with mats and the installation of how you do the docks in salt marshes. And yeah, so even leaving a float in a salt marsh is considered fill, and it's a violation of not just the Wetlands Protection Act. I think it triggers 401 for water quality certification because you need a permit for anything in a marsh for temporary or permanent elevation, if they even allow it. So it's a very strict thing that I think a lot of people just haven't been educated on. And obviously, we haven't been able to really maximize our, resources to be educating people about this. So I'm starting with the 5 things update. I would love to post something to our website with like dock BMPs or something, and then obviously be having this conversation with applicants when they come before us that this is what we expect and this is what you can't do. And if you do it, there's going to be enforcement, consequences.
It's too late in the season to do very much about it now. But it's something that long-term we should be looking at. Maybe over the winter, we can develop a better understanding ourselves of how many docks we're talking about. And we do have that marvelous tool now, Nearmap, to know who's doing it and who isn't.
Yep.
And so maybe by next spring, when people are ready to put them back in the water, is the time to inform them that when they pull it out next year, the expectation is that they're going to get it over to the boat ramp, either leave it in the water or get it over to the boat ramp and haul it away to storage. We just can't drop a bomb on them, this week or next week, because they're going to be doing.
They're going to be taking them out this weekend, probably.
Yeah, and we can't do that. I mean, but we need to get our ducks in a row. We need to be clear on what the rules and state rules and regulations are, and our own. Maybe we even want to modify ours to some extent, still to be consistent with the state, but somehow indicate that one solution that we would approve is removal at the boat ramp. And so we'd want to talk to Lori, of course, to see what she would think of that. because everybody's pulling their boat out of the water, and all of a sudden, if we got 24 floats that have to come out too, things could get pretty crowded down there at the
Yeah.
boat ramp. It only works at, fortunately, it does work now at low tide. At the lowest of low tides, you can still get a boat in and out of there, which is good. So that would resolve some of that scheduling, I suppose. But
The Gulf will definitely be easier than Little Harbor. Little Harbor is just, it's so shallow, and how are you gonna get it out? And is there gonna be like a mass exodus of people all trying to do this at once with how many people have docks there now? So we'll have to, yeah, we'll talk to the harbor master. Maybe we can reach out to DEP and DMF and see what they recommend. I could also check other towns, because I know Duxbury and Situate, and they all have a lot of docks too. Maybe they have BMPs.
Yeah.
What they,
so we've got time to do this. We've got 4 or 5 months to do this, and maybe
I was
we,
only half kidding about doing like a mass show cause. Can you talk to council about that? Like if we have multiple.
I could look into it, yeah. Yeah, if I take a tally this winter and
Save us,
write a letter, just send it to all of them.
yeah, save us some time. I mean,
You could do a meeting just for that, maybe so it's not like clogging
Yeah.
up one of our agendas. You could like have a special meeting, and it's a big show cause with all the people who've been brought forward.
it's a cut and dry issue as far as I'm concerned. You just can't do that. You can't put the
Yeah.
float on the marsh.
Yeah.
and even worse than putting it on the marsh is dragging it across the marsh.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Some of these floats are more than 100 feet away from the upland, particularly on the Gulf River. And so you're tearing the marsh up pretty well if you're dragging one of these things up to. I mean, you can float them on a king tide, maybe, but there's still going to be some potential damage, because in some cases you've maybe only got 6 or 8 inches of water to float them on, and some of them probably draw more water than that. Draw more water than that. So
Probably the most damaging part about a dock, because there's all these studies that are about the actual piers and the height and the orientation and the spacing and all this other stuff. But what I haven't read is anything about the floats and storage and methodology for removing. I mean, once the dock is there, it's there. And as long as it's at the proper height, allowing for adequate light and stuff, I mean, of course, there's the cumulative impact, but minimally for each dock, it should be a minimal impact. But then I think what we maybe haven't been thinking about, myself included, is the actual float when it's taken off.
well, we were reminded of that. And then the other issue is clearly we need to develop some looser standards for ecological restoration, address the Phragmites issue. Because these things keep coming up, and we've already kind of created a precedent over on Howard Gleason Road.
For
which-
mowing, yeah.
Yeah, for mowing. So we really need to think about how we might allow for ecological restoration. I know, Sanji, you probably went through this to some extent yourself when you put your dock in. I remember the hearing was really an issue. Phragmites was an issue, at least with your neighbor there. So
Yeah, I mean, I was surprised that there was like some type of enforcement here, because I was under the impression, incorrectly probably, like that you wanted us, like Eric had said, to like get your weed whacker out every weekend and cut them down and stuff like that. And so, it would be, I think clarity would be really helpful here, maybe.
yeah, well, our regulations are actually fairly, I think, fairly strict, and maybe too strict. We need to have some room for what we would call ecological restoration for invasive species, without, again, resorting to herbicides. Or
Yeah.
if so, there are herbicide methods that are used by, well, for example, the U.S. Park Service has Phragmites problems, and they use Roundup.
Oh, wow. Sounds
But-
dangerous.
But they just don't spray it around out of aerosol. they cut the stems and they apply
Yeah.
a straight shot right to the cut stalk. So I think that there are methods to do this, and we should be following the science here, I think.
I've been going down a rabbit hole for an upcoming town project, and there are a lot of methods. So it's
Oh, for Phragmites?
not just that, just invasive species in general, because they obviously all have different types of rhizome and root structures, and certain types of methods might work more than others. Then you have seasonal restrictions, and then you obviously have to include hand pulling and all this other stuff. So it's not just one method or the other. Sometimes it's almost a combination of multiple different methods. So yeah, it's Phragmites specifically though. There's a lot of methods.
So we would need an order of conditions that spelled out what
Oh yeah,
what methodology, and of course, I think we'd want this signed off by a landscape architect or a wetland scientist.
yeah,
To do
certified ecologist or something, or
I'm not sure that
wetlands.
we want to just open the floodgates and let every
Mhm.
owner
They
do
also,
the
oh, sorry,
baby
Tom. go-
best to cut Phragmites.
They also have to be a licensed applicator. So to use herbicides, you have to have the legitimate licenses through the state to apply these chemicals. So you can't just, I think, obviously we'll evaluate it more, but you should definitely be having the right professionals going out there, not just any guy with a can of round or, thing of Roundup who's going to spray it everywhere. These are very specific licenses, very professional, types of applications for herbicides. I forget what the name of the permit is, but you have to apply through the state website.
To use
So-
Roundup?
Hmm?
To use,
No, for invasive species removal.
okay.
Yeah, so like for ecological restoration, invasive species removal, and then roadside maintenance and management, you have to be a licensed applicator.
Okay.
So land stewards usually are, especially for large properties, but private wise, I don't think so. I mean, these people are just buying it off of, so.
So just to be clear, mowing in the buffer zone is like an acceptable thing, but the salt marsh itself is Phragmites, which is a resource area. Is that what? Is that the distinction?
Our regulations are tough because we say that the 50-foot buffer zone is a no alteration zone.
Hmm.
So depending on how you look at it, even temporary, cutting and vegetation removal can be considered, of course, an alteration that can have an adverse impact. So it's really hard to advise people, on how to maintain their properties right now. And I just tell them the way our regulations are, you pretty much have to leave it unless, off the record, if someone's just hand pulling certain poison ivy or things off. I don't consider that an alteration necessarily, but like the whole weed whacking and cutting, it can have a temporary erosion or flooding impact if you do it during the wrong time, So it's tough, it's tough to advise people on this, but I definitely get these questions a lot, and I would love to come up with guidance on how we can help people. Maybe if we have clear guidance, maybe 1 month or 1 year we'll waive filing fees if everyone wants to apply for them or something, and do a special meeting where they're all, I don't know, that's a lot, but just something to kind of educate people, I think, is more important.
Okay. Does
figured out.
anybody else have any wild flights of fancy they want, since we're kind of stepping out of our usual let's adjourn and go back to what we're doing at home. We did finish fairly early. It's only 8 minutes after 8, which is really great. Nice to have a short meeting. So if you have any other ideas that you want to just sort of broach.
For the minutes, we can call
This
them
might be-
topics reasonably anticipated in 48 hours, because I know,
Yeah.
sometimes you got to stop the recording for these types of talks, but we can just call these 48-hour
Yeah.
topics.
Fine, we can watch the Bears game.
Yeah, we almost broke the 8 hour mark. I don't think we've done that yet.
Yeah,
I mean, 8 o'clock mark.
yeah. Well,
We were there at 7:45, and then we had some good conversations, but
Yeah.
that was a good record for us though.
we rarely get the chance. We rarely have enough time to have sort of a bit of a free
Yeah, no, it's good.
conversation about the directions that we might consider going and issues that are still a little bit nebulous. So it is a good
Oh,
opportunity.
Yeah. Agreed.
yeah, Tom, something I've seen in the older minutes, and we can also do this in the future. There used to be agent updates and then chair updates. I don't know where the chair updates went, but that was something I saw in the old minutes, like, you know, a couple years ago, maybe before the pandemic. But, you know, technically, you know, we should be putting these on an agenda to discuss. You know,
Yeah,
if we
okay,
wanted
so-
to put like chair updates or other commission updates or something, and if you guys ever have anything, you can just email me and Angela and we'll put it on the agenda.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, you could do that.
Yeah, and with a sort of an unstated agreement that we only do this on meetings that appear to be short.
Yeah. Yeah.
We don't have
Obviously, for a
we don't
meeting
have
that
these
goes late.
conversations at 11:45.
Cool.
Okay. If there's no other comments, I will make a motion to adjourn.
Second that.
Motion to adjourn, second. All in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Vote on this one. Aye.
Okay.
So, a nice
All right,
night, all.
guys.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Good meeting.
Thanks.
Bye.
Have a good one,
Night,
guys.
everyone. Thank you, Charlotte.